Central at Bridgestone Arena. So let's get right to it. Let's start with our reaction, and let's go to Willy Daunic, whose son is 2 wins away from being a national champion in baseball. And we will get to that. Don't worry, Willy. We will get to Mahoney Daunic's complete game in a win-or-go-home spot, and Dennison now being 2 wins away after a huge comeback late last night. But let's start with your reaction to the Predators hiring Chris MacFarland as president of hockey operations and GM.
You mean that the Dennison Big Red is not the headline of today's show in Nashville, Tennessee? Come on.
let me just say this. It was going to lead the rundown until the hire was made. So it was going to be the lead topic until the hire was made. But we will get to it, I promise you.
Very understandable. I am riding the wave up here. But I was taking notes, and once that news broke this morning that they had received permission, I think that was the gateway. I think it was all a formality at that point. I think it was just a matter, based on our conversation last week with Elliot, it was just a matter of whether Colorado was going to let him go or put up a big fight to give him reason to stay. And I think as it's come out with some of the details, in looking with what Colorado's reaction was when they released the statement, they wished MacFarland well, but they took no time to say Joe Sakic will be reinstated as the GM. We move forward. I think that illustrates the dynamic we were asking Elliot about, that Joe Sakic, much like John Elway is in Denver and that whole region, the legendary player who becomes a front office guy and leads the franchise to success. You know, they're legend for life. It's going to be very difficult to be outside of Joe Sakic's shadow, even if MacFarland was doing a lot of great work behind the scenes with contracts and trades and building the roster around their superstar players. So this looks like an opportunity that MacFarland wanted to seek, and the Predators were patient and took advantage.
So let's just start with a rundown, Derek Mason, of Chris MacFarland's resume as someone in an NHL front office. Just for those of you who are unfamiliar with Chris MacFarland. Chris MacFarland has been the Avalanche GM for the past 4 seasons. He was promoted to that title shortly after the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup in 2022. So Chris MacFarland had been the Avalanche's GM for 4 seasons. Over those 4 seasons, Colorado had a record of 205 wins, 94 losses, and 29 overtime losses. Those 205 wins are most in the NHL over that span. The .669 points percentage is tied for first with the Dallas Stars over that span. In those 4 seasons, the Avalanche made the playoffs all 4 years. They won 2 division titles and 1 President's Trophy. Chris MacFarland is a finalist for the GM of the Year award this season. So he's been incredibly successful at the helm of the Colorado Avalanche. And look, I know there's going to be a question. And Derek Mason's role today, Derek Mason is the voice of the fan. Derek Mason is going to be asking Willy and me questions about this hire and what it means. He's going to be asking the questions a lot of you have as well. And you can also ask questions, again, at 615-737-1025. And one of those questions surely will be, how much influence did Chris MacFarland wield as Avalanche GM? As Willy mentioned, Joe Sakic, franchise legend, is the president of hockey operations. And as we know, with the Tennessee Titans, when multiple people have lots of titles, you never know who's in charge of what, who has final say, who made this decision, who made that decision. So I'm sure a lot of you have the question, how much influence, as I said, did Chris MacFarland wield as Avalanche GM? Who is he responsible for trading? Who was he responsible for signing? All of those things. We don't have the answers to those questions. Corey Masisak, my old friend, who covers the Colorado Avalanche for the Denver Post, he is going to join us in the 5 o'clock hour. He probably has the answers to those questions. But Derek, your role, of course, is to be the voice of the fan. So Avalanche, he's been the Avalanche GM, Chris MacFarland, for 4 seasons. Before that, he was the assistant GM of the Colorado Avalanche for 7 seasons, from 2015 through 2022. And before that, he held multiple roles in the Columbus Blue Jackets front office over 16 years. So Chris MacFarland has been working in NHL front offices for roughly 30 years. He's been around. He's held a lot of different roles. So there's no question he is highly accomplished. Derek, when you saw this hire, what were some of the first questions you thought? Willie and I will do our best to answer those questions.
Well, first, because I try to draw correlations to a lot of things, obviously, to my the sport that I participated in at a professional level. So I try to draw these correlations or these comparisons. And once again, I'm drawing a comparison to what the Nashville Predators are doing and what the Tennessee Titans have done. It's been 2 years now. They go get a GM, whether he had everything to do with it or little to do with it. They went and got a GM from where? A winning organization. I'm talking about most recently winning. This is 10 years ago or 15. Most recently winning. You just gave the numbers of the Avalanche record over the last, 4 or 5 years, somewhere around there?
Yes, over the 4 seasons, the 4 regular seasons, where Chris MacFarland was GM of the Avalanche, they had a record of 205, 94, and 29. Those 205 wins, most in the NHL over that span, the 669 points percentage tied for first over that span. So the Colorado Avalanche in the regular season have been the best team in the league since Chris MacFarland became GM.
And it was same with Borgonzi. Even though Borgonzi was an assistant GM, he still was a part of a winning organization, an organization that was winning now. And we expect, or it seems like that's what's going to happen with the Tennessee Titans as they make their moves. I see that being the same with the Colorado Avalanche, going out and hiring MacFarland to be both your GM and president
of hockey operations, yes, and general manager.
Exactly.
Boiled down to its essence, Chris MacFarland is calling the shots.
Yes, he runs everything.
If a move is made by the Nashville Predators, Chris MacFarland is responsible. There's not going to be, was it this person or was it that person? It's Chris MacFarland. He runs the team the same way David Poile ran the team for many, many years. David Poile was also president of hockey operations and general manager of the Nashville Predators. So the way things were under David Poile in terms of how things were run, it's the same thing. It's just now Chris MacFarland.
So now you go at Borgonzi's the same way. In every true essence of a GM, he controls everything. The buck stops with him when it comes to the roster. So that's the same way with MacFarland. So congratulate the Predators for going out and finding someone from a winning organization, someone that helped put together a winning product. And now with the talent that they have, albeit some of it is getting older, but they do have some young talent and they have some draft picks. So hopefully what was done in Colorado can be done here. But here, I think this is the question now that the first question everybody wants to ask, because we've talked about this for the longest. What are they going to do with the roster? What are they going to do with some of these older guys? A lot of these guys have no move contracts, but the essential question was, what are they going to do with the head coach? And how does this affect Brunette? So I'm going to ask you guys, how does this move from knowing what you know about this GM? How does this move affect Coach Bruno?
Willie, why don't you start?
I think it's early in the process to know that. I don't know if Chris MacFarland has any background with Andrew Brunette. That's what I would love to know. And tomorrow at the press conference, I'm sure we'll find some of that out, if there is any backdrop there, because Andrew Brunette's been a lot of places, and Colorado is one of them. He played for Colorado for a long time. He's been in the front office in different circles, and you meet people. He was at times not on the bench in his tenure at Minnesota. My thought is, if you're a new GM, this is just my opinion, I think it's smart to not completely clean house. I think the first priority will be, what do you want to do with the roster and the salary cap, all that cap space, all those draft picks? Half of them came from Colorado to start with. I wouldn't doubt there's going to be some jokes tomorrow at the press conference. Hey, you just left Denver where you traded a bunch of draft picks to Nashville for some players. Now you get those draft picks back. They've got a lot of Colorado's picks on the docket the next few years. So I think there's a lot for Chris MacFarland to do. And I think it would be a smart move based on the fact that I think Andrew Brunette did a really good job with his coaching staff last year to start the season with them. I'm not saying they have to extend Andrew Brunette, but I think it would be wise to watch the season unfold. And then that's a card that a new GM has to play in his deck that he can use at some point if he wants to then make a change and go in a different direction. But he doesn't have to do it on day one. So I think that Brunette, more likely than not, will be the coach to start next year. But that's just a feel that I have, a gut feeling. It's not based on anything. I don't know Chris MacFarland and what's in his head.
I looked through Chris MacFarland's and Andrew Brunette's resumes earlier today. I don't see where they would have crossed paths. I mean, Chris MacFarland has been in the NHL for a long time. Again, he's been working in NHL front offices for roughly 30 years. But looking at the teams he's worked for and the teams Andrew Brunette has worked for, there does not appear to be any overlap. We can get more clarification on that tomorrow, but it does not look like MacFarland and Brunette have crossed paths in any sort of meaningful way. Here's my initial reaction to this hire. I, like many of you, have been wondering what the holdup was in this search, which lasted, again, 4 months. 4 months to the day that the Predators announced Barry Trotz was retiring. They announced the hiring of Chris MacFarland today. So I wondered, just like many of you, what the holdup was. The hiring of Chris MacFarland, who, as I mentioned, could win GM of the Year this season, is incredibly impressive. And importantly, an outside the family hire. That's something that I said on February 2nd. The one thing I did not want the Predators to do was to hire someone with Predators ties. You know how I reacted to the idea of Tom Fitzgerald, and Tom Fitzgerald hasn't been a member of the Predators for how long, Willie?
24 years.
That was too much even for me. 24 years. I did not want someone with Predators blood in any way, shape, or form to be holding this position. And I acknowledge, as I often do, well, not often, sometimes do, go a little overboard. I wouldn't say often. I say sometimes. But the fact that MacFarland is an outside the family hire and he's up for GM of the Year, he helped a team win the Stanley Cup. Again, I can't tell you precisely what percentage of credit Chris MacFarland deserves for the Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup in 2022. He joined the organization when the Avalanche were down bad. He helped build up that team to be a perennial Stanley Cup contender. In recent years, the Avalanche have disappointed in the postseason. Since the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup in 2022, I believe they've been out of the first round twice. They were eliminated in the first round twice, eliminated in the second round once, and eliminated in the conference finals once this season, being swept by the Vegas Golden Knights. So on paper, this is an incredibly impressive hire. The question I have, and we will talk about this throughout the show, the question I have, Willie, is this. Chris MacFarland is inheriting a team that has missed the playoffs 3 times in the past 4 years. He is inheriting a team that has an aging yet still productive core. Yesterday, Willie, Derek and I talked about the Golden Knights and Hurricanes and what the Predators can learn from those two teams in terms of roster building. And my main takeaway was the Golden Knights and Hurricanes have been aggressive traders. The Golden Knights more so, of course, than the Hurricanes, but both teams have been aggressive traders. Does Chris MacFarland, as he has shown a willingness to do in Colorado, does Chris MacFarland go bold and try to win while Roman Josi and Philip Forsberg and Ryan O'Reilly and Steven Stamkos are still viable contributors? Or does he start anew in some form? That is a question I have for him. I'm sure it's going to be asked tomorrow at his news conference, again, 11 a.m. Central. But to me, that's one thing I wonder about now that Chris MacFarland is at the helm of the Nashville Predators.
And I think it will be something to note how much he gets into it tomorrow. Or does he do what might buy him some time from a press conference standpoint and just say, hey, I just got here. I'm doing my due diligence on the roster. When we know that even though he was in the throes of a cup run trying to get the Avalanche to the top of the mountain as recently as last week, I still think it's probably a good bet that he knows that roster pretty well in Nashville, that he's been eyeing this behind the scenes for a while. He knows, for example, they got almost $34 million in cap space. He knows how many draft picks they've got. He knows about the prospect pool. So I think he's got the ability to answer that question, Adam, tomorrow if he wants to, or at least give you a general sense. But because I think people will still be taking note of what Bill Haslam said and what the players said, or Bill Haslam said it at Barry Trotz's press conference 4 months ago, and then what the players said right after the season ended, and that is they want another shot. They want to get back to the playoffs. They feel like they can do it. They were a good team for the last 2/3 to 3/4 of the season. We know that that's on the record. So how does Chris MacFarland, how does he absorb that information that's out there that the public already knows? So you're right. I think to go backwards and rebuild, he would have to take a couple steps back to take several steps forward. And then you're right. The bold move is probably what it needs to be if they're really going to be a good hockey team next year. And neither one of those options, it would be easy, right? Because of contracts that would be ones that you might want to move. Those might be the least likely to move, or the toughest to move because of no trade things and that nature. So it's not an easy thing, although there is a lot in the cupboard, right? With the prospect pool where it is, the draft picks that they have ahead, and the cap space they have. There's a lot that they can do, but it's not going to be easy.
Trevor on our text line says, I'm a little lost. How does MacFarland go from being a GM to the same title with the Predators? Well, he received a promotion because in Colorado, he was just the general manager. Joe Sakic is the president of hockey operations. And as Willy mentioned, the Avalanche have said that Joe Sakic will also now be the GM, at least on an interim basis, as they navigate MacFarland's departure. So it is a promotion to be the president of hockey operations and the GM. The simple way of explaining it is this. As I said before, David Poile had both titles for a long time. Here's what it is as simple as I can explain it. Chris MacFarland is calling the shots, period, the end of story. Any move the Predators make, free agent signing, waiver pickup, trade, coaching hire, coaching fire, whatever. Any decision the Predators make, it's now because Chris MacFarland is making the decision. That's really all you need to know. This is not a situation like with the Tennessee Titans a couple of years ago where it was, well, is it Rand Carthon making the decision, or is it Chad Brinker making the decision? Is it Mike Vrabel making the decision? Who has final say? That will never be a question with the Nashville Predators under Chris MacFarland because he's calling the shots. So that's all you really need to know.
And in Denver, I think Joe Sakic was involved, right? You could say, I don't know the specifics of, hey, do I have to run everything past Joe Sakic? Is Joe Sakic the one on the phone? I think Barry Trotz would be the first to tell you when he was dealing with Colorado, he was dealing with Chris MacFarland. But that doesn't mean that Chris MacFarland wasn't going to Joe Sakic and saying, all right, Joe, what do you think of this move? Like, I don't know if Joe Sakic, quote, had final say, but he had a lot of influence. He had his fingerprints all over that roster, whereas he won't have that step in Nashville.
615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Your reaction to the Nashville Predators hiring Avalanche general manager Chris MacFarland as Nashville's GM and president of hockey operations. MacFarland, Bill Haslam, and Sean Henry will hold a news conference tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena starting at 11 a.m. Central. I assume we will be carrying that for you live. 615-737-1025. We'll continue the conversation and take your reaction coming up next. In the meantime, today, the Nashville Sounds take on one of my favorite team names in all of sports, the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp. First pitch today is at 6:05 p.m. Catch all of the action on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks Family Leisure and Social Cantina.
If you've lived in Middle Tennessee for any time, then you've seen how crazy our weather can be. From winter storms, tornadoes to flooding, we've seen it all. Like many of you, the winter storm earlier this year caught me unprepared. I lost power for 7 days. The 7 days worrying about whether my pipes were going to burst, or 7 days paying a hotel bill. Just completely, I was just unhinged at times. But after that, that's when I decided and realized, hey, listen, being prepared isn't optional. I will be ready the next time a weather emergency hit. So I started to look around for whole home generators and found Tri-State Water, Power, and Air. They've been in business for over 30 years, specializing in generators for more than half of those, which is all great. But the reason I reached out to them and chose them was because of the reviews and the confidence other homeowners share with their experience with Tri-State Water, Power, and Air. When Tri-State came to the house, they did a free on-site assessment, made sure the generator fit me and my home's needs. The thing I appreciated the most was they didn't try to oversell me. They got straight to the answers, turnkey, and they handle everything from installation to long-term services. If something ever goes wrong, I'm not calling around because I hate doing that. I'm making one call to Tri-State Water, Power, and Air because they've got me covered. That's the kind of relationship I want, and I know that's the kind of relationship you want. So look, the weather isn't slowing down much. Be ready. Call Tri-State Water, Power, and Air today to protect you and your home. Find them at tristatewhywait.com. That's tristatewhywait.com.
Chris is a finalist for GM of the Year. We see the moves, the trades, and stuff like that, but just what can you say about him and the work he does for this organization?
Yeah, I think it's, first off, very well deserved. I think it's probably, a couple of years coming. But oftentimes with the work you put in and the blood, sweat, and tears, there's a delayed reaction, a delayed, recognition of that. So, like, this team for me wasn't just built in this year, it was built over the last couple of years, and with the guys that have remained, with some of the new guys we got last year and some of the moves that were made. But I think it's like Chris said, I've known and worked with him for a long time, and it's no one's going to outwork him, and no one's going to watch more games and
easy.
Easy. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but most people would.
That was Avalanche coach Jared Bednar talking about Chris MacFarland being named a finalist for GM of the Year. That was before the Western Conference Final. By the way, that was MacFarland at the end going, easy, easy. Bednar laying it on a little bit thick there. But now Chris MacFarland is the president of hockey operations and general manager of the Nashville Predators. That was announced earlier today. We'll take your reaction all show long. 615-737-1025. Derek.
Here's a question for you guys, and it piggybacks on what Willie said. And we talked about this when it happened, when the guys came from their end of season meetings. They talked about, this team remaining together, this group remaining together. And we were all sort of scratching our heads a little bit, because how can they say that when they don't have a GM in place? So fast forward, they found their GM / president of hockey. What if, and this goes to both of you, what if MacFarland comes in and says, you know what, after sitting down and scouting this a little bit more, because obviously he has been watching his team and they've done business with the Predators over the years. What if he comes in and says, I understand what is out there, but now that I've really looked at this roster, I think we should go in the opposite direction. How do you think that mesh with, one, the message that was put out prematurely, and the guys that are in that room that message was told to?
Willie, why don't you start? Do we have Willie? There he is. Yes. Willie, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. You got me?
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
I think you have to have the gumption. I don't know if that gets a bell or not, Adam, but I think you have to have the gumption to say, this is why you hired me, to make the tough decisions. And the players may feel one way, but I have to do what I think is best for the organization. And, I think the key in my mind is they are right on a borderline right now of being a playoff team that if everything went right, you could have a fun season and say, you know what, that was a fun ride. And they were better than expected. And there are a couple of catastrophic injuries to, I shouldn't say catastrophic. There are also a couple of players getting hurt for an extended period of time who are veterans from dropping back down, deep into the lottery kind of thing. Right. So it could go either way if you just sort of stayed the course. Mm-hmm. But what Barry Trotz has been laying out there for the last 4 years, he's been pretty consistent. Right. You can talk about the mushy middle all you want, but he has had a plan, and that is to develop the future core. So he's already laid the groundwork for that. So that's the good thing I think that Chris MacFarland could say, is he could take it either way and say, you know what, I'm taking the next core and I'm going to try to speed that along, and I'm going to try to leave some more room. And if we have to take a couple of steps back in the meantime, we're going to do it. And he's also got, guys who know how to win, like Ryan O'Reilly and Steven Stamkos and Roman Josi, and saying, you know what, these guys still have some hockey in them. So in the meantime, let's see if we can compete. Either way, so much is riding, and I say this all the time, on that young core that they already have in the system, that if they're pretty good, or if they're really good, then the team is going to be pretty competitive in another year or two as they mature. If there are a bunch of duds in that farm system that are, quote, overrated, or, they have the 5th best or the 6th best prospect system, if that doesn't turn out to be anything of note, then they're in big trouble, and they're going to have no choice but to redo it. So I do think he should be given the ability to make his own decision as the GM, because that's why they waited for 4 months, I would think, to get his tutelage. And I think in that soundbite, let me just add this real quick. That soundbite we just played from Jared Bednar, who was a heck of a hockey coach. I don't understand why there's this, well, I don't know, we haven't heard anything about Jared Bednar. He's one of the best coaches in the league. If they're actually thinking about moving on from him, that would be a big mistake. I hope Colorado, as a division rival, is dumb enough to move on from him. That would be a terrible move for them. But I'll put that aside. But what you heard from Bednar is what it takes to be a GM. you have to have that everyday engine, that thirst of how am I going to make my team better today? Let's watch this game or that game. Let's find the diamond in the rough. Let's watch this other game, and maybe we could get something more out of this player who plays for another team. No, but that team doesn't want him. They're not using him right. We could bring him in. All of these things that a GM has to be thinking all the time. And that was something that Barry Trotz, as he got into the job and understood what it was like to be a GM, this is the middle of the summer or the middle of the offseason. Back then for Barry Trotz, who was a coach, he could turn the engine off for a while. The GM never turns the engine off. So Chris MacFarland, I think, has that engine, and so hopefully that will serve him well in this job to make that tough decision that Derek's asking.
Looking at what Chris MacFarland has at his disposal now, the things that are on his to-do list, the Predators have approximately $27.2 million in projected cap space this offseason, according to Puckpedia. The Predators do not have any major re-signings to make. No disrespect to Eric Holla. I would not consider him a major re-signing. Tyson Jost, I believe, is also a pending unrestricted free agent. Justin Barron is a pending restricted free agent. So the Predators don't have to sign one of their core players to a big deal right now. The other thing, too, is I'm looking at the Avalanche's lineup from their final game of the season, Game 4 of the Western Conference Final against the Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm looking at all of the players that Chris MacFarland acquired in recent years. The Avalanche's entire second line in that game were all acquired via trade by Chris MacFarland. Nazem Kadri, Brock Nelson, and Martin Necas. 2/3 of their third line, Ross Colton and Nick Waugh, acquired via trade by Chris MacFarland. Their fourth line center, Jack Drury, acquired via trade by Chris MacFarland. Both of their goaltenders, famously, Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, acquired via trade by Chris MacFarland. Over the past few years, the Avs have been among the most aggressive teams in the NHL, trading prospects and future draft capital to strengthen their current roster. And I understand that the Colorado Avalanche are in a much different position than the Nashville Predators. We're going to talk in the 4 o'clock hour about the Myles Garrett and A.J. Brown trades and what those trades could tell us about Jeffrey Simmons' value. The Los Angeles Rams and the New England Patriots are in a different place than the Tennessee Titans. So it's hard to say, well, MacFarland did that with the Avalanche, therefore he will or should do this with the Predators. But again, you look at the ages of the Predators' core players, Derek. Philip Forsberg is going to be 32 at the start of next season. Ryan O'Reilly is going to be 35. Steven Stamkos is going to be 36. Roman Josi turned 36 yesterday. UC Saros is going to be 31. All of those players have shown that they can still be viable contributors to a team. Forsberg and Stamkos both scored 40 goals this season. Ryan O'Reilly may have had the best regular season of his career. Roman Josi just went to the World Championship and won MVP of the tournament. So I see an older core, but a productive core. So again, that's the question that Chris MacFarland, that's, I think, the number one question he is going to have to answer. Do I want to squeeze as much as I can out of Forsberg, O'Reilly, Stamkos, Josi, and Saros and try to win while those players are still leading my team? Or do I need to take that intentional step back, even at the risk of losing some of those players, and try to rebuild for the future? I mean, to me, that's the number one question that MacFarland faces.
I'm not sure if that, I'm not going to say it isn't attainable this season, but I look at it from this standpoint, and y'all chime in if y'all feel I'm sort of going off or I'm not correct. But he may come in and think, based upon what you're saying, like come in and say, well, I'm just going to try to get the last bit out of these several guys that have come off really good seasons. Now, we know Colorado, they make moves. They don't mind giving away picks, you know. So he's coming from a place that is sort of like big game hunting in a sense. We want to go out, we want to try to win with these guys now, and it's paid dividends for them. So if he comes here and he's trying to do that, that would make me think, and correct me if I'm off base here, is that would be in his mind sort of big game hunting to keep those guys, Stamkos, O'Reilly, guys like that have come off really good seasons, and say, I believe in my younger guys, that because I believe in those younger guys, I can keep this core together once again. Because whether he's in Colorado or here, you're only going to go out and get, big game. The only reason you're going to do that is because you still believe you can win. You still believe you have a shot at winning a championship.
But remember what, and Willie, you chime in as well. Mm-hmm. You mentioned it, Derek. Remember what Steven Stamkos and others said at the end of the season. There's no talk of rebuilding here. I'm paraphrasing what Stamkos and others said. So if MacFarland believes that too, perhaps the reason why MacFarland got the job, one of the reasons why MacFarland got the job, is because he told the Predators, hey, you guys don't have really any interest in rebuilding. I'm not sure I have interest in rebuilding either. I still think this team can win something meaningful if I'm aggressive.
But he can only be aggressive if he believes in, one, obviously, the older guys, that they can come back and at least, if not duplicate, come close to their performance in the previous year. But you also got to believe in your young talent that you have, which then it then makes you ask the question, would he go out and try to get even more and leverage those picks?
Willie, quickly, what do you think?
I think you have to look at where Colorado is as opposed to Nashville. Colorado has got two of the premier players in the sport.
Correct.
In the prime of their career. So that mentality was to, let's do everything we can to try to load up while these guys are in their prime. And that's what really anybody would do when you have players like that. And really, there's a couple other guys in the core of Colorado, but when you really get down to it, I got two superstars, and maybe if they had a third in Rantanen, that's now, I guess, Marty Necas, who is not the same player as Rantanen, but it's really, how do I win and maximize the value of those two guys? And that's different than where the Predators are. The Predators are still in I'm transitioning to the next core. And in the meantime, can you win and can you support Ryan O'Reilly, Steven Stamkos, Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, etc.? Can you support them with enough that you can make the playoffs in the meantime? I think it's a big reach to think that you're going to win a Stanley Cup with the core that you have right now, the current core. Even though Stamkos and O'Reilly, those guys are winners, man. Those guys know how to win, and their biggest value, I think, is what they are providing to the young core every day that they're there. And that's, to me, the reason to keep them. But to think you're going to win a Stanley Cup that way, that's not, I don't think that's the end game. I think it's, how do I see if I can have some fun in the meantime and make some accomplishments while I marinate this new core. But the key, the threading the needle is, can you support O'Reilly and Stamkos and those guys enough? Because they can't do it all by themselves. As they age, you're going to need more from those youngsters. And so you need some acceleration by those youngsters in a hurry. And that's going to be, I think, keys. What does he think of those youngsters like Matt Wood and Evangelista and all those guys on the way up that we haven't even really seen yet?
615-737-1025. We've got a lot of reaction. We've got a lot of questions from you. We will get to them next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game.
Ellie, let's circle back one last time to MacFarland.
Okay.
How do you see the dynamic between him and Joe Sakic? Because I think, taking titles aside, right, there would be a perception from afar that Joe Sakic, because of his legendary status as a player, is still the guy that is in charge. But we're not there every day, right? So MacFarland could be the brains of the operation and doing everything. I just wonder how he perceives. Does he perceive himself as the number two? And he might be looking at Nashville saying, well, I would be the clear number one in Nashville.
You know what? I get along with Chris pretty well. He's a very guarded guy. Like the Sakic and MacFarland, they do a really good job of keeping a lot of stuff quiet. Like, I think he recognized, first of all, I think the Avalanche recognized that even though Sakic is the president, MacFarland does a lot of the work and a lot of the legwork. I think they recognize that.
That was Elliot Freeman on our program last week discussing the dynamic between Joe Sakic and Chris MacFarland in Colorado. Perhaps this answers this texter's question. If MacFarland is this great, why did the Avs let him go? Or why did he choose to leave? I mean, he got a promotion and probably a lot more money. But this is an opportunity for Chris MacFarland to run the show, which he may not have been doing in Colorado. Let's get to your reaction. There's a lot of it. 615-737-1025. Kevin in Florida says, I think it's an outstanding hire. Now, if the Call of Duty fan base, who wants instant action and success, let him do his job, then we will have many years of winning seasons. One texter says, nothing or no one should be safe. Maybe Yossi and Forsberg, unless they want out. Otherwise, other than that, everything is tradable and on the block. MacFarland will do what is right for the franchise. A lot of that depends on the direction he wants to take the franchise and whether all of the players with no movement clauses agree with that direction. He can't just trade Steven Stamkos if he wants to, or Roman Yossi, or Philip Forsberg, or Jussi Saros. Really, the only player of significance he can do that with is Ryan O'Reilly, and that's a question I also have as well. Will Chris MacFarland honor the agreement that Barry Trotz had with Ryan O'Reilly? Ryan O'Reilly does not have trade protection in his contract, but the Predators famously have treated him as if he does. I do wonder if MacFarland holds on to that or if he treats O'Reilly any differently. Here's a good question from Kevin from Smyrna. The Predators have the one-person model for the two jobs. MacFarland is now the president of hockey operations and the GM, while the Avalanche had two people for those two jobs. Across the NHL, which model seems to work better? It's a good question, Willie. I don't have the answer for it, but I'm sure if we went through every team's media guide and looked at how many teams have president of hockey operations / GMs in one title, I think that would be an interesting exercise.
I'd like to look past the title. And I believe that regardless of titles, that you need a team of people, one way or the other, right? Whether you have really two guys at the top, which it appears that at Colorado, Sakic was sort of the overseer and MacFarland was the day-to-day GM doing a lot of the legwork. And in the big picture questions, Sakic, who had already been a GM, who probably was at a stage of his career where he didn't have to do it every day, was like, okay, you do all the legwork. I'll be the macro guy. I just think there's different ways of doing it. But as Elliot has pointed out so many times, who's your guy that's running your AHL team? Who's the guy that is really keeping an eye on your salary cap? Who's the guy that's really watching the prospects and who is scouting for the future draft picks? You know, those are all the facets of the game that, you know, and who's your analytics guy? All of these things, you got to have those departments. And you might have strengths in a lot of the areas, but you may not have strengths in all those areas. Very few people can do it all by themselves. So I think it's got to be a team. And that's another question I think I have, guys, is there a guy or two that Chris MacFarland would like to bring in that he's comfortable with maybe that he worked with in Colorado, or maybe he's grown to know over the years that he thinks he could pluck for somebody else? Or is he going to stick with the guys who have been in Nashville for a while? A Scotty Nickel, who I think is a guy that could be a GM someday. He's the GM of Milwaukee. Jeff Kelty, who apparently you heard Elliott say he interviewed very well. He's the guy that's been running their draft. What about Brian Poyle? I feel like there should be room for him to bring one of, quote, his guys in there, but I'm curious about that. I don't know.
It's a good question. John in Nashville says, the two teams in the Stanley Cup final do not have elite players, but a bunch of good players, which could be the Predators' pathway. I completely disagree with that from the aspect of the Vegas Golden Knights. I think Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner are pretty damn elite. I understand on the Hurricanes side, the Hurricanes don't necessarily have that superstar, that McKinnon, McDavid, Kucherov, Celebrini type. But the Carolina Hurricanes have a lot of very, very good players. But I look at the Hurricanes, though, and we're talking about what Chris MacFarland should do. The one thing that the Predators are missing when you look at the build of their NHL roster, they've got the older veterans leading the way, as I mentioned. Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, Ryan O'Reilly, Roman Josi, UC Saros. They're all in their early to mid, and even in some cases, late 30s. And then the Predators have some younger players on the rise. Matthew Wood and Ryan Ufko, Fedor Svechkov, and Zachary LaRue. But they're missing that middle group. And I look at the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm looking at their leaders and scoring in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Jackson Blake has 15 points in 13 games. Jackson Blake is 22 years old. Logan Stankoven has 12 points in 13 games, including 9 goals. He's 23 years old. Seth Jarvis, who's been a very good player for the Hurricanes for many years, he's 24 years old. Outside of, in my opinion, outside of Luke Evangelista, the Predators are missing that middle group. They've got the 30-somethings. They have the really young 20-somethings that are on their way, hopefully, for the Predators' sake. But they're missing that middle group, the established 24, 25, 26-year-old with proven track records in the NHL who really represent the future. And I do wonder, Willie, how the Predators can go about maybe acquiring some of those players. You're going to have to be aggressive. That's the word of the day. You're going to have to be aggressive. You hope that some of your own prospects develop into that group and join Luke Evangelista in that group. But the Predators might have to think outside the box to find those 25, 26, 27-year-olds who can help push them in the right direction.
It's a great question, because I think if you look at Carolina and Vegas, two great case studies, they are completely different on how they've built their rosters. Yes, they both made a lot of trades, but I think the Golden Knights are much more, who cares about the draft picks? Let's go for the big fish. Let's go all in for the big fish, and let's make it work. Whereas Carolina is, if you look at their roster, I think they've got way more players that have been there for a long time. They are, quote, Rod Brindamore's guys. They have said, Rod Brindamore's a great coach. Let's find players that fit his system. And I think they have made some wise picks. Like you mentioned Jackson Blake. I don't know what, is he a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick? He's a really good player that they drafted. I think the answer, how I would answer your question, Adam, is the Predators in the next 2 or 3 years have to hope that some of these guys become their Jackson Blakes and then Sam Jarvis's and Logan Stankoven, who was a trade, right? He was a trade guy. He wasn't a draft pick for Carolina. But I think that to me is your answer. Soon enough, those guys are going to be 24, 25. They've got a lot of them. Evangelista is about to get into that range. Svechkov is a great example. Which way is Svechkov's career going? Was that just an off year last year, or could he make a jump and be a solid 3rd-line center? I think it could go either way. He might prove that he's a fringe NHL player in another year or two. They got to move on from. Or he could make a jump and be a piece of a good winning team if everything goes right. But this is what's really hard to know. I think about a lot of the good thing is there's strength in numbers. The Predators have a lot of these guys. They could go either way.
615-737-1025. That's sometimes what happens when one of us is remote. We don't know when we're going to stop talking. 615-737-1025. But Willie still got his point out, although I trampled all over it at the end. 615-737-1025. All right. Switching gears, we will get back to the Predators' hiring of Chris MacFarland in the 5 o'clock hour. Corey Masisak of the Denver Post, Colorado Avalanche reporter, will join us in the 5 o'clock hour as we get his perspective on the Predators' hiring of Chris MacFarland. But coming up next, some massive trades in the NFL yesterday involving Myles Garrett and A.J. Brown. What do those trades tell us about the potential value of Jeffrey Simmons? We will get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. In the meantime, speaking of the Predators, if you would like a pair of tickets to the Nashville Predators Beer Festival at Bridgestone Arena on Saturday, June 20th, be caller number 3 right now at 615-737-1025. Caller number 3 will win a pair of tickets to the Nashville Predators Beer Festival at Bridgestone Arena on Saturday, June 20th. Good luck. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. DMase, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5. The game. Ugh, jeez. Can we redo that? Nope, we're live. 102.5, the game. Willy, Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and Connor Newt here with you.
Happens to us all.
Oh, man.
Words are hard.
Words are hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing that this job does not involve saying words into a microphone for 3 hours a day.
Darn it.
We're going to recover. We're going to dust ourselves off, and by ourselves, I mean me. Trevor Matitch will join the program in about 15, 20 minutes. We'll get into the massive trades that were made in the NFL yesterday. I actually do want to start this hour by getting Willy Donick's thoughts on the massive trades made in the NFL yesterday. The A.J. Brown trade from Philadelphia to New England, we all knew it was coming. But Willy, specifically, I want to know what you thought about the Myles Garrett trade from Cleveland to Los Angeles.
As you know, or may not know if you're listening out there, you guys know in the studio, I am in the state of Ohio. I am in Cleveland Browns country, and I have many relatives, a couple of which I'm staying with right now, across the state who are huge Cleveland Browns fans. As much as Myles Garrett is a great player, I think the Browns fans are really on board with this trade. They were losing with Myles Garrett. So when I looked at what they got, I was thinking great trade for the Browns. Now it may not work, right? The Browns seem to manage to not put it all together, right? That's just been a problem for them for all these years. It just doesn't seem to go right. But I think the move makes a lot of sense. They get a player right off the bat who's younger, and he's not Myles Garrett, but he's a really good player. And they get a first-round pick. And so they're going to save some money because Myles Garrett, held them hostage, and they paid him a ton of money. I thought it was a great trade for the Browns.
So because of these massive trades yesterday, friend of the show, Nick Suss, wrote an interesting story at the Tennessean with the headline, "What Trades of Myles Garrett and A.J. Brown Say About the Titans and Jeffrey Simmons." And I will read from Suss's story. Quote, "In exchange for Garrett, who is 30, the Browns got from the Rams a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 second-round pick, a 2029 third-round pick, and Jared Verse, a 25-year-old two-time Pro Bowler who hasn't yet reached his prime. The Eagles got a 2027 fifth-rounder and a 2028 first-rounder from New England for Brown, who turns 29 on June 30th. Split the difference there, and Jeffrey Simmons' value feels fairly identical to what the New York Jets got from the Dallas Cowboys for defensive tackle Quinnen Williams in fall 2025. A first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a 28-year-old rotational depth piece. Is Simmons more valuable than that? The Titans clearly believe so. That's why he's still wearing Titan blue. But let's indulge the conversation. Derek, what do the trades of Myles Garrett and A.J. Brown tell us about the potential value of Jeffrey Simmons?
I'm not sure if it tells you his value more than it tells you, what these teams are thinking. New England got AJ because they feel they are one offensive player away from winning the Super Bowl. If they had them an A1 receiver, they would be more in line to win the Super Bowl. And then obviously we know what the LA Rams think. F those picks. Let's get somebody, an impact player right now, and let's go. So I'm not sure how much it means in regards to Jeffrey, but it shows you where all three of these teams are, relative to the marquee players we're talking about. The Titans are not in a position that New England and the LA Rams are in. No way, no how, at least not yet. They feel they are getting there, but in order to get there, they need a guy like Jeffrey Simmons. They understand that, listen, his shelf life may be another 2-3 years at max level. But his leadership to them means more to a young group that they believe one day will help this organization become more like New England and the LA Rams, meaning the winning culture, meaning being perennially in the playoffs and winning Super Bowls. So It does from the importance, not necessarily from his play, but how they look at him and his leadership. It means a lot.
Here's a good question on our text line, and we'll all answer this question. Texter says, curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Let's say you're Mike Borgonzi, and the Rams call inquiring about Jeffrey Simmons. If they offered the same trade package they reportedly offered the Browns, would you make the trade or turn it down? I know DMase was strongly against trading Jeffrey Simmons, so I'd be especially interested to hear his thoughts on this scenario. I will answer the question. I don't want to speak for Willy Donick, but I think I know Willy's answer. I think if the Tennessee Titans were offered the same package for Jeffrey Simmons that the Browns got for Myles Garrett, both Willy and I would volunteer to drive Jeffrey Simmons to the airport.
100%. I would do it.
Not even a question in my mind.
No question in my mind, and that's nothing against Jeffrey Simmons. To me, that's a haul. A first, a second, a third, and a two-time Pro Bowler who's 25. Now, Garrett is a little older than Simmons, right? By a year or two?
Yes, I believe that is correct.
And I would get the U-Haul. I would load it up. I would absolutely do it because that's what the Titans need to be a good team when their stadium opens in those opening years. And to me, that's great use of an asset. You've got great seasons out of Jeffrey Simmons, but that's too big to turn down. That's too big to turn down. And I do believe that at some point when Matthew Stafford runs out of gas or gets hurt, which could be any year, those picks could turn pretty valuable. They may not be a late first-round pick someday.
Myles,
now, 2027 could be different, but 2028, 2029, those could be pretty good picks, top 100 picks.
Myles Garrett is 30. He'll be 31 in December. Jeffrey Simmons is 28. He will be 29 around the time training camp starts.
Okay, we're talking about two different scenarios here. One that has actually happened, and one was we were, putting together a package. And in that scenario, none of those packages included a two-time defensive player of the year, or it didn't include a guy in return that I was getting was a two-time Pro Bowler and was young and is continuing to ascend. We were not talking about trading Jeffrey Simmons for a two-time Pro Bowler, a young guy again.
Like
that
Verse.
Seems like Verse. We wasn't talking about.
And I'll tell you up front, I don't know anything about Verse in terms of his leadership, his locker room presence. That could be an issue. I don't. Why would the Rams want to trade a 25-year-old two-time Pro Bowler, even for a guy as good as Garrett? That's a fair question. But Verse as a talent, that's the type of talent I love. I get him in exchange for a guy like Garrett who's going to cut. That's a no-brainer.
Well, the Rams are telling you why. They feel that they tried it with They feel they tried it with Verse, even though Verse is a good player, but they are trying to win now. We signed our quarterback back, our aging quarterback. We gave him a new deal. In order to give him a new deal, we didn't take a defensive player in the first round, meaning was shocked. So in order to let our franchise quarterback know and give him some peace that we're trying to win now, we go out and get the best defensive lineman and probably the best defensive player in the NFL right now. They are making moves to win now. The Titans, if this package was presented to the Titans, I think the only way you don't take it is if you believe that much in Jeffrey Simmons' leadership and that you believe he's vital, like truly vital. He is the heartbeat of that organization. That's the only reason you don't make that trade. But if you're telling me I am getting a player, and not just a player at a need position too. Jared Verse plays the outside. So that's a person at need, and you went and got John Franklin Myers already, then I'm making that trade every day, all day, because what I'm getting back is more than, and this has nothing to do with Jeffrey Simmons. But listen, he's getting older, and it would mean more to a team in the future to take Jared Verse in those picks than to keep Jeffrey Simmons.
Here's more of what Suss wrote, Willy. Quote, the risk reward meter isn't cut and dried here. The Titans know how good Simmons is, and having a top-tier player with strong leadership traits on a rebuilding roster is a priority for this regime. Sure, trading him could help bring in younger players of equivalent value who will hit their primes more according to the timeline of the rest of the team's young core, but it could also lead to draft misses who are far less valuable than even an aging Simmons would be. That calculus hasn't changed, even as more teams have been willing to take the risk the Titans have opted against.
Hey, well, I think your question was right when you said, and what you said was right, period. But when you said, what is his leadership? Because that's what you would be giving up in hopes to get back. Not just he's shown from the outside, we can see Jared Verse is a damn good player, and he's only going to get better barring injury. What we don't see is the leadership in the locker room. That's the only thing that I would be concerned about. Yes, we're getting a good player, but also are we getting that leadership? Now, if he's showing leadership in the locker room, that's a double win for me, because that leadership will continue to grow, and you have a guy that's coming in with fresh eyes, and he doesn't know anything about the old way here. But what he knows about is the winning culture they have in LA, and he's bringing it here and that leadership.
I also look at it. This is just my assessment of the Titans roster right now. It's a little bit like the Browns. They're not ready to win right now. If I thought that they could win this year or even next year, and who knows, Cam Ward makes a big jump and they hit it big with Carnell Tate, they could make a pretty big jump and feel pretty good about next year. And Jeffrey Simmons will still be a really good player next year. But I still see the roster as I want to take chances. I agree. The fear of screwing up picks that you get, well, I mean, that's the Browns, right? They've acquired plenty of picks, and they just haven't drafted very well. They pick high every year. The Jacksonville Jaguars, most years, they pick high, and they screw it up. And the Titans, the last few, unfortunately, the Titans are in that group now. They had 5 drafts that turned up basically empty with a couple of scraps in there. But you can't be you have to believe that the way to get better is through the draft. It's more so in the NFL than probably any other sport. So I don't think I could turn down those assets where the team is right now, as good as Jeffrey Simmons is.
Let's go to our phone line, driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com, and welcome in T-Mac in Murfreesboro. T-Mac, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Man, I got a lot to say, but I'm going to try to make it quick as I can. First of all, I'm convinced that you guys hate Jeffrey Simmons. It doesn't matter how many times Mike Berganza get up there and say we're not trading Jeffrey Simmons. You guys like to flirt with topics that involves trading Jeffrey Simmons. So, and then I'll say this. To answer the first thing that you guys are talking about, I think the Titans are in different positions than the teams that made trades. They're in a different position than the Cleveland, because Cleveland is not trying to win right now. They've already funded on their season, getting rid of key players. They don't feel they're close. The Titans feel that they're close. That's the reason why they are not trading Jeffrey Simmons, nor even want to remotely even flirt with the idea of trading Jeffrey Simmons. And then the Rams feel like they're right on the brink of winning another Super Bowl. So, of course, they're going to add one more piece to complete their quest. And then, of course, with AJ going to the Patriots, that just makes sense pairing him with his old coach. And then Philly don't want to deal with him because he's a crybaby. But that has nothing to do about the Titans. The Titans feel like they can win. They feel like their coaches may have been a reflection of why they were losing. And now they got the coaches and everything in place. So they feel like they can win right now. So they're not in the same position as Cleveland.
Thank you for the call, T-Mac.
Well, I mean,
To be clear,
we did discuss that.
I do not hate Jeffrey Simmons. I have absolutely nothing against Jeffrey Simmons. And neither does Willie. And neither does Derek.
I'm not that guy. I've never gotten in a fight with him or a verbal exchange with him at a practice or anything like that where you come home and you whine, oh, he's not a leader. I've never been that guy. I have never been that guy. I am a big fan of Jeffrey Simmons. But if you're sitting in the GM spot, he's an asset, and he's every player in the league is a deteriorating asset at some point. And so T-Mac thinks they can win right now. That's fine. If he thinks they can, then if he's the GM, I understand that. And the Titans clearly think they can win while Jeffrey Simmons is on that roster. I just don't fall into that camp.
Well, I mean, Jeff, when he's being the leader that we expect him to be, and he has been that way since the last sort of incident he had. And, you condemn the incident. Hey, that was wrong. But he's come in since then, and he's been the leader that the Titans, especially this young team, needs and needed. But again, Willie's right. As it doesn't matter. Cleveland just showed you that it's about, how do you build a team? It's not necessarily about, well, we just got to keep this guy because he means so much. When you know that you've gotten to a point where, hey, listen, it's better to unload this guy, get a lot for him, than to keep him because we're nowhere close to winning, then you have to make that move. If it's in this league, you become a commodity after a while. Especially if they start to see that you're declining a little bit, you become more of a commodity in the sense of we are willing to trade you, move you in order to make our team better. This isn't about whether Jeffrey is a player that's still playing at a high level, because he is. Myles Garrett is. AJ Brown is. But what happens is a team look at where they're at and they say, well, would it be more beneficial to trade this player, or will it be more beneficial for us to keep him? Well, the Titans have already shown you, that it was beneficial for them to keep Jeffrey Simmons. The story may be different in 2 years, and Jeffrey Simmons still may be playing good football. I expect that. But it changes because why? Because your team changes.
615-737-1025. We'll talk about this and more with Trevor Matitch coming up next. 615-737-1025. We are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. DMase, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Let's go to our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend, ESPN football analyst, Trevor Matitch. Hi, Trevor. How are you?
I'm great, Adam. How are you doing?
We're doing well. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. So let's make sense of the blockbuster trades in the NFL yesterday. Let's start with the Myles Garrett trade from Cleveland to the LA Rams. I want to focus on the Browns' perspective because in exchange for the best defensive player in the NFL and Myles Garrett, the Browns get an outstanding young defensive player in Jared Verse. When you consider the acquisition of Verse and all of the draft picks that came along with him in exchange for Garrett, what do you make of how the Browns did in yesterday's trade?
I think it was brilliant by the Browns. So, I mean, Myles Garrett might be the best defensive end the NFL has seen since Bruce Smith with the Buffalo Bills. You know, and so he is a generational player. But the Browns can't really use him right now if their goal is to get to the point of being competitive in their division and making the playoff and then making noise in the playoff. Because by the time they get to that point, it's very likely that Myles Garrett will be slowing down. And trading him to a place that I'm sure he would much rather be gives them resources to be able to build the team so that they can then move forward and achieve their goals. And, you know, you talk about Jared Verse getting there. I mean, he's got the potential to be an elite pass rusher. You know, last year he had 7.5 sacks, but I go back to college and I look at his football character. I mean, he tore it up at Albany in the FCS and basically was told, just go get the quarterback, just go run around and go attack. And he did. He led his conference in tackles for loss one year. He just all kinds of awards, transferred to Florida State. He excelled at Florida State as well. And in his first year there in 22, Jared Verse had he was named all ACC first team, had more votes than any other defensive player in the conference. The Athletic named him first team All-American, and he could have come out to the NFL at that point. But he decided he wanted to stay at Florida State and continue to grow. He showed a professional humbleness, and he did even better his second year there. So the Browns are getting a guy that not only has potential elite physical skills, but also from a football character standpoint, somebody that I believe is going to be a great addition in that locker room. And then what do the Browns need most right now, right? Quarterback. And getting all those draft choices, including a number 1 and 27, they have the ability to bundle to move up in a quarterback class next year that by all accounts should be a very deep, very talented quarterback class and finally get that position squared away. So I think the Browns, even though they lost a generational defensive player, have set themselves up for the future.
On the other side, Trevor, we know how the Rams operate. They don't care about draft picks. They want to win. And Myles Garrett certainly helps them do that. But I am wondering about the risk that the LA Rams could be taking on by making this move. Garrett is an older player, and the aging curve could come for Garrett at some point. It's an expensive roster, I have to imagine now. I don't have the cap numbers in front of me. But what are the risks the Rams are taking in making such a seismic move?
Well, if Garrett gets hurt, then all of a sudden it all goes away. But I think it's the right risk for the Rams to take because they're trying to maximize Matthew Stafford at quarterback in the time that he has left playing at a high level. And they kind of blew that one in this year's draft when they picked a quarterback to replace him, Ty Simpson out of Alabama, in the first round, the 13th pick in the draft, instead of taking a player there that might be able to help Matthew Stafford right now, certainly in the next couple of years. And so a lot of people gave them a lot of grief, including me, for making that decision and not helping Matthew Stafford. And it goes back in a lot of ways to how Green Bay drafted Jordan Love, the replacement for Aaron Rodgers, instead of somebody that could help Rodgers get back to the Super Bowl and win it with Green Bay. I thought that was not the right move for them to make, because when you are in position to make a legitimate Super Bowl run, you do everything you can to maximize that opportunity. Right now, that opportunity is named Matthew Stafford. And by adding even an aging around 30 years old, Myles Garrett, they maximize their ability to do the work now to get to and win a Super Bowl. And then, in the years that come, if it doesn't work out, well, hey, they did their best. And if it does work out and they have to blow up the team because of salary cap issues, et cetera, and rebuild, they already did that. I mean, I think it was 22. They only won 5 games, and all of a sudden now they've built back up to where they're currently, I believe, the odds favorite to win the Super Bowl this year. So they've done it before. So it's the right move for the Rams to take this risk by drafting and really by mortgaging future draft picks and a young player, sending him off, Jared Verse, but to bring in a guy that can help them win the Super Bowl right now because their window is open right now.
Now, Trevor, there was another big trade in the NFL, and obviously we all knew this was coming. It was more so when, not if. A.J. Brown get traded to the New England Patriots. Is New England A.J. Brown away from winning a Super Bowl, and where does this put the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think the Eagles they got is what they wanted out of A.J. Brown. I don't know that there'll be a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth that he has now moved on. Plus, they got a pretty good package for him from New England. But New England was in the Super Bowl last year with one of the best young quarterbacks in the league in Drake May, and they weren't able to do much against Seattle, in part because their receivers weren't able to do too much. And then you've got their best receiver from last year by a mile, Stephon Diggs, was released for salary cap purposes. Their next best receiver, who's still on the team, is a tight end, Hunter Henry. And so they're really desperate for elite performance at the receiver position. And even though a lot of people will suggest that A.J. Brown might be a little rocky in a locker room, I think for Drake May, he's exactly the kind of veteran receiver that they need. And given that they let go of Stephon Diggs, I think it's good for them. And I think it's good for Philly because now Philly has more draft capital to be able to do things. Ultimately, New England has got to consider themselves in a Super Bowl window now because they went there last year, even with an offensive line that wasn't great and a receiving core that wasn't deep. And I think they're trying to fix those two things so they can maximize where they are.
Now that these trades have happened, the question that we had today that Adam had for us is, well, what does that mean with Jeffrey Simmons? You've seen these two deals being done, but the Titans chose to keep Jeffrey Simmons. Is it more so about those teams and where they're at, or is it more about how the Titans truly feel about Jeffrey Simmons and not just his production?
Well, I think those teams that made those trades were in the perfect position for both sides to benefit. I don't think there was a winner or a loser among any of those 4 teams. I thought it was 4 winners. As far as Jeffrey Simmons is concerned, every indication that I get out of the Titans camp is that they love everything about that guy. But in some ways, the Titans are in a similar position as Cleveland, except they already have their quarterback of the future now in Cam Ward. And with Jeffrey getting up there in age, you've got to figure that the Titans need to be building in a way that maximizes Cam Ward's curve of growth. And last year, he struggled early in the season. The second half of the season, as the schedule eased, Ward did much better. This year, by all accounts, out of OTAs, he's taken the next step forward. They've built a better team around him in terms of receivers, and then offensive line. We'll see if it's better. Certainly, they brought in more guys for more competition, and it is Cam Ward. It's all about Cam Ward. And Jeffrey Simmons' role on this team is how can he help Cam Ward take this team to the next level. And it might be that the best way he, at his age now, can help Cam Ward is the same way that Myles Garrett helped the Cleveland Browns. Now, Garrett, I'm sure didn't make that decision. But at the same time, if there's a team that feels like they're a star defensive disruptor away from making a Super Bowl run, and they're willing to give up for Jeffrey Simmons the same kinds of packaging that the Rams gave up to get Myles Garrett, I think the Titans should make that trade. Not because of anything negative about Jeffrey Simmons, just to say that you want players around Cam Ward when he rounds into his prime in a few years that are also rounding into their prime. And in a few years, Jeffrey Simmons will be at the back end of his prime.
Do we have
Trevor,
Willy? There we go.
Yeah, Trevor, I have struggled to answer this, but we continue to get this. I don't know if I struggle to answer. I've tried to answer this, is the best way to put this. But we continue year after year to get a lot of questions that have to do with the Titans in regards to trades like this, right? With Jeffrey Simmons, where you get a package of draft picks. People will say, you know, they've screwed up the draft, so why would you want the draft picks? They're going to screw them up anyway. How would you try to explain to people that concept? Even though that's true, the Titans have not drafted well the last 5 or 6 years. It still looks like maybe they're turning the corner the last couple of years with Borgonzi. But how do you answer that question when people say that?
Well, I would say that they're right to be a little bit shy about that and to be concerned about whether or not the Titans can draft well, especially at the top of the draft, first 3 rounds. But at the same time, what is the logical wargaming conclusion of that? Okay, the Titans can't draft, so they need to trade all their draft picks for veterans, right? Well, that's silly as well. And ultimately, they're not going to build this team through free agency to be consistently competitive for deep playoff runs and possibly even the Super Bowl once in a while. They have got to have outstanding, productive rookie stars on their rookie contracts in order to make that work. So you could say that they're not drafting well, and therefore it's too big of a risk to trade Simmons for draft picks. But if you say that, then what you're saying actually is that there's a limit to what they can accomplish because they're not going to have enough star players on rookie contracts to be able to get there from a salary cap standpoint. Because they'll always be overpaying for free agents because you always overpay for free agents. And we could talk about several, important contributors to the Titans that are on the team right now that came via free agency that probably were overpaid for. Well, you don't overpay for rookies, and that's one of the key components to it. So I would suggest to those fans to say that if the Titans don't draft well, then they just need to get better people in to draft better.
Trevor, let's pivot to college. I read a really good article by Pat Forty, and he was really doing a deep dive into all of the aspects of what a 24 team playoff would do. And he was trying to give both sides of the argument on a lot of the elements. So let's take the actual postseason out of it for a second. I thought a really fun one to try to, because I don't know what the answer is until we see it. But he argued that if you go to 24, the regular season, some people say, oh, the regular season would be so much better because there are so many other teams, so many teams would be in contention that wouldn't otherwise. But he also made the point that instead of saying, now you might have an Iowa-Minnesota game late in the season that the winner has a shot to get in as the 23rd or 24th team. The loser's out. Great. But he also said on the other side of the coin, a huge LSU-Alabama matchup late in the season wouldn't mean anything or as much because they're both going to make the playoffs anyway. So would a 24-team playoff increase or decrease the value of the regular season in your mind?
I think it would overall decrease the value because those big games are no longer big games. Fans will care about them that are passionate fans. You talk about, Alabama, LSU, or Ohio State, Michigan. They'll always care about those. But from a national standpoint, what used to be appointment viewing, what used to be critical in terms of making the playoff or making the best bowl games, et cetera, now you're going to watch backups play because the starters are going to rest. It's going to be just like the NFL. And that to me is the big risk of going to 24 that I think 16 would not provide as big a risk. Going to 24 forces college football to get rid of college championship games, I believe, conference championship games. And going to 24 would force changes in college football that would turn it into the NFL. And one of those things is that conferences, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, who cares, conferences are mildly interesting sideshows, only important in the ways that they relate to teams making the playoff. Divisions in the NFL, nobody cares that you're the division champion. Nobody cares, except for how it relates to the playoffs and home games and things like that. And that, to me, would be so sad if the SEC, for example, turned into, in a few years, once people kind of sort of forget about how amazing an SEC championship race used to be, and turned it into, an AFC South race, that same kind of thing. It's interesting only in regards to the playoffs. Because in the NFL, the only thing that matters is, do you make the playoffs, and then do you make and win the Super Bowl? That's it. And going to 24, I think, would cause that in college football. And for all the teams that are on the back end fighting at the end of the season to make it, that's exciting. You've got the teams at the top that are mailing it in, and that's less exciting. I think at 16, it's kind of a sweet spot. 12 would also be a sweet spot. But, people say that, you could go to 16 and those last 4 teams won't be able to compete anyway. I disagree with that, because the way NIL is right now, a lot of talent is getting spread around in ways that it wasn't in the past. But if you get to 24, you're just adding teams that probably are set up to just get blown out just because there'll be a lot of money. Now, having said that, I do think eventually, probably sooner rather than later, they will go to 24 because the money is going to be enormous. But I think it will be sad because it will erase some of the unique things about college football that differentiate it from the NFL and turn it into NFL light.
Trevor Matitch has been our guest on DMase, Vingan, and Donick. He joins us every Tuesday breaking down the NFL and college football. Trevor, as always, a pleasure. We'll catch up next week.
Thanks, guys.
615-737-1025. Of course, the big news of the day. The Nashville Predators have hired Chris MacFarland, former Avalanche GM, as their president of hockey operations and GM. And we will get back to that at the top of the hour. But coming up next, there was also some big news on our show. We're going to let Willy Donick brag about his son coming up next, because his son Mahoney, 2 wins away from being a D3 national champion. We'll do that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. As I've been saying for the last several years, Loan Pronto has helped a lot of families get on better financial footing by using the equity in their home. Some people aren't aware that they have this option, and I've tried to get the word out as best I can that that's the way to go. Interest rates are so high these days, they can really eat up your monthly budget because of the high interest rates, sometimes up to 29%, things like that. It's really hard to do anything but make the minimum payments with your monthly budget. So you're spinning your wheels. So using the equity in your home to access thousands of dollars in cash is the way to go. That's the rapid equity loan program from Loan Pronto. You can pay off your credit cards, your existing HELOC, a car loan, and get money for a home improvement project if that's what you want to do. And you'll be on much better financial footing because of it. Zero out of pocket, no hard credit pull up front, no appraisal, no long drawn out bank process, and no touching your first mortgage. Rates are at near 3-year lows, so take advantage. Call right now, 615-499-5780, or visit loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780, or visit loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
DMase, Vingan and Donick, 1025. The Game, Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. At the top of the hour, we will get back into the big news of the day. The Nashville Predators hiring Chris MacFarland as president of hockey operations and GM. But before we do that, the reason why Willy Donick has not been with us the past couple of days and the reason why he's remote today is because he has been cheering on his son, Mahoney, a member of the Denison Big Red baseball team, which is now 2 wins away from winning the national championship. And I want to give Willy Donick a few minutes to just brag about his son. So let's set the stage here, Willy. Denison, the #1 overall seed in the D3 tournament. It loses a game in this round or the previous round now. The first lost in, 45 games, 44 consecutive wins, something along those lines. Your son was on the mound for an elimination game yesterday and pitched a complete game. And then in the second game, Dennison comes back from a 7-3 deficit in the bottom of the seventh to win 11-7. And as I'm tracking the game, I can only imagine what coach/dad Willy was like yesterday. I can't even begin to imagine. So I want you to tell us. But let's start with your son Mahoney in a win or go home situation for the best team in D3 baseball, pitching a complete game. How did that feel in person?
Yeah, it was phenomenal. It's what you would think. It's the best game he's ever pitched for sure, and especially considering what was on the line. You mentioned it; they had won 44 games in a row, and a 45th in the first game of the World Series would have set the record for Division III. They tied it in the Super Regional, but they lose that game, and so they had to win 4 consecutive games, including 2 yesterday against the team that beat them, East Texas Baptist, to reach the final. That's a long way to go. It takes a lot of pitchers to do that. And just in the context, Mahoney has been when you're that good, you win that many games, you got a lot of good pitchers. So it's not easy to get in there. He's a sophomore. Every time I shouldn't say every time, when he's been called upon, he has done the job all year long for the most part. But he's been the 4th starter or the 5th starter or a swing man. He could start, he can come out of the bullpen for long relief. So he's really had to wait his turn. So he got the opportunity and everything was on the line. They had to win. And he pitched the best game he's ever pitched. So, I mean, to go 9 innings these days at any level is hard. He had never done it before. And he had on a 110 pitch effort, 77 strikes. It was just a really good pitching performance. He moved the ball well. It was flowing. It was a close game for 5 or 6 innings. And then late in the game, they opened it up, which allowed him to really go to the finish line. And I just can't tell you what it feels like to watch a team like that get behind him. You guys know the backstory. Mm-hmm. Some listeners may not, but his mom, my wife Erin, passed away just over 10 months ago. And so they know his story. The parents know his story. So when he went out there to take the mound in the 9th inning, you can hear me welling up a little bit. I mean, it was special. They all jumped on their feet because it was an inspirational performance because he's saving the bullpen, right? They know that, the pitchers, they get tired this time of year. The games are compressed. You got to get depth. And so he is doing a lot of things, not only winning the game, but he's preparing them for the next game. And man, it was a great feeling to watch the last few outs. So phenomenal day. And then they come back later that night. They fall behind 4-0 before they got an out in the first inning. They were down 6-1. They were down 7-3. And it was just another great comeback by a great team. And I will give this big picture to all of you who are parents out there who have a ball player, and not just baseball, but any sport, guy or girl. There's so much, and I was in that, but I'm saying this as a former Division I athlete at Vanderbilt. There's a lot of notion of you got to get a scholarship or you got to play Division I or it's not worth it. I can tell you that the experience, D1's great. There's nothing wrong with D1. Like we talk about D1 all the time. But it's not the only great way to have a college experience. The experience he's having right now with this group is just a really special thing. You can have that at different levels besides Division I. So it's been really cool.
Well, this is what you talked about, sort of like this is your sort of push for guys not to transfer and all this other stuff. Because of moments like this, you make lifelong friends, you get to grow and go through hard times, and people are able to be there for you. But you don't have that if you continue to move. And what Mahoney is experiencing, especially after, like you said, everyone knows the story, even with that. And I said this to Adam. I said, listen, for them to be on the brink of, being eliminated out of the tournament, and the coach turns to a sophomore who hasn't been in a situation like this. Because we all know in sports, pressure does two things. It either breaks you or molds you into the player ultimately you're going to be. And for that young man, Mahoney, to go out there and pitch the way that he pitched under that circumstance for a sophomore, and like you said, you've played Division One, I played Division One, and just think of being in a moment like that in your early college career. That's pressure. And for him to stand up tall and pitch well, and his teammates to be behind him and support him, that has to be huge for him. That has to be huge for you, as well as his sister. And I know his mom is looking down on him, and she's proud.
One texter says,
She was there.
One texter says, way to go, Mahoney. That's fantastic. And I love Denison. My daughter played lacrosse there and had a wonderful 4-year experience. She graduated in 2016. So we're very proud of Mahoney. We know how meaningful it was for him and you and your entire family. We are looking forward to the championship series, which starts tomorrow. Denison versus the Endicott Gulls out of Beverly, Massachusetts.
Endicott Gulls.
The first
Boston based. So they took on Dallas. East Texas Baptist is basically Dallas, right? And got all guys from Texas. So it is truly a national tournament. So next up, Boston, Mass. So we'll see what happens tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. And NCAA.com, I have to give them a shout out. Really good coverage. So if you want to go back and watch his game, or you want to watch live tomorrow, if you want to jump on the bandwagon, there's plenty of room if you want to watch. It's good baseball, and it's good coverage out there. This place in Eastlake, which is just a couple minutes outside of Cleveland, is they do a really good job of hosting.
Where can they watch it again, Willie?
NCAA.com.
Okay.
There you go. 615-737-1025. We're all cheering on Mahoney and the Big Red.
Can I say one more thing, Adam?
Yes.
It took me from the end of the game until the beginning of the next game. There was like 5 hours in between. I had that many texts of people reaching out, and I was just trying to get back to all of them. It was unbelievable, the outpouring of people that reached out and said, "Hey, great job!" All of that. That was me. That wasn't even Mahoney's fault. If you put it all together, I don't know how many people reached out, but those are moments that you'll have for a lifetime. Now let's see if they can cap it off with as they say, the kids say, a natty.
It sounds cooler when they say it. 615-737-1025. All right, coming up next, we'll get back into the breaking news of the day. The Predators have a new GM, also a new president of hockey operations. It's the same person. Chris MacFarland will react to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. DMase, Vingan, and Donick, 1025 The Game. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and Connor Newt here with you. Corey Masisak, Colorado Avalanche reporter for the Denver Post, will join us in roughly 15 minutes to get his perspective on the major news of the day. Former Avalanche GM Chris MacFarland has been hired by the Nashville Predators as their president of hockey operations and general manager. Chris MacFarland had been the Colorado Avalanche GM for the past 4 seasons, building the most successful team in the regular season over that span. Chris MacFarland will be introduced tomorrow at 11 a.m. Central at Bridgestone Arena. I assume we will carry that news conference for you live. Part of a statement from Nashville Predators chairman and majority owner Bill Haslam, quote, "We could not be more pleased that Chris has elected to join the Predators organization and lead our hockey operations group. We conducted an exhaustive search and were able to meet with several very qualified and impressive candidates, but all along we were hopeful to interview Chris. He turned out to be a perfect fit for us, just what we were looking for to lead our organization moving forward. I'd like to thank the Colorado Avalanche, the Kroenke family, and Joe Sakic for giving Chris permission to talk with us and for supporting his desire to make this move. I'd also like to thank the members of our search committee, those who expressed interest in joining the Predators in this role, and especially Barry Trotz for his work in positioning Chris for success. We appreciate everyone's time and effort in this endeavor," end quote. So my initial reaction to this move, as I said earlier today, I wondered what the holdup was in the Predators GM search. It was 4 months ago today that the team announced that Barry Trotz would be retiring at the end of the season. The hiring of Chris MacFarland, who could win GM of the Year this season, is incredibly impressive. And importantly, an outside the family hire. I am really looking forward to his news conference tomorrow. I am wondering if he's going to give us any sort of insight into his plan for this team, because he is inheriting a team that has missed the playoffs 3 times in the past 4 years and has an aging yet still productive core. Does MacFarland go bold and try to win while Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Steven Stamkos are still viable contributors? Or does he start anew in some form? Because he does have experience with that as well. Although the Avalanche have been competing for the Stanley Cup since MacFarland took over as GM in summer 2022, he was a member of the organization since 2015. And things weren't going well for the Avalanche at that time. They had to rebuild. He was a part of that process. So he has seen it from both sides. So, Willy, what intrigues you most about this hire? Chris MacFarland as president of hockey operations and GM of the Nashville Predators.
I think if you look at what he's done with the Avalanche, I think you can say that they did a very good job of recognizing when you have superstar players in their prime, that you do what it takes to put the complementary pieces around them. And if you look at what they did over the last few years, they were not afraid to change and mold and mortgage the future to try to get the right atmosphere. And of course, they won the whole thing in 2022. They've been in the mix in a very, very deep division, in a deep conference every year. And they had one real big hiccup as the defending champions, and this does happen to more defending champions than you might think. They lost in the first round of Seattle. Remember that? That was the one hiccup. But other than that, they've lost to really good teams in the playoffs. And I think you look at their roster and say, could you win the Stanley Cup with that roster? And the answer is yes. Even at times when they've had to juggle some salary cap issues early in the season, they would find ways to, by the end of the year, say, okay, do they have enough? Yes, I think they have enough. I think that's the job of a general manager. But as you said, Adam, it's a unique challenge that what you have here for the Predators. I think it is a long shot at best to think that you're going to take over this roster and win a Stanley Cup next year. I think it's much more about a 2 to 3 to 5 year plan of how do you gradually get back to a window like that. they don't have Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon. They have some really good winning players that know what they're doing, and they will be a great influence on a very big pool of young players. That's a very different formula than what he's been dealing with Colorado. So how does he shift over to this unique situation in Nashville and make the adjustment? And what does he decide to do? Because as we've talked about so many times, you could go a number of different directions, right? He's got the money, tons of cap space, lots of draft picks, a very good prospect pool that already is in the system. It does lack the crown jewel. And you've got some unique players who are in their 30s that still could be good. And I've said before, if everything went right, could you win a round in the playoffs and look at everybody at the end of the season and say, was that a fun year? Yeah, that was a heck of a fun year. And you also could go the other way, where some guys get hurt, nothing goes right, and you fall off the cliff. And all of that is possible. So that's what you earn your money for when you get a job like this. And I admire him that he wanted to take it and leave a place like Colorado where he probably was pretty secure.
Scott in Shelbyville says, you will get nothing tomorrow at the press conference, I'm sure. He just got off the plane, and he isn't going to give you any hint on Andrew Burnett, I'm sure. Well, that's not all I care about, but it's my job and other reporters' jobs to ask questions to Chris MacFarland and see if we can get some answers. So we're going to try. He may give us nothing, but we're going to try. But here's one thing I do want to touch on quickly before we get to our guest, Corey Masisak of the Denver Post. I heard Big Joe Dubin today rant about this a little bit, and it made me chuckle. So there is a tournament that happens around this time every year in international ice hockey. It's called the World Championship, the IIHF World Championship. And Team USA won this championship last year for the first time in something like 90 years. It was like a ridiculous number. But I'm sure many of you didn't even know that, because in the United States, the World Championship isn't a huge deal, but in other countries, it is. Finland won the tournament, and they celebrated like they had won the Super Bowl. They had a public celebration, all of the players on stage, including Jussi Saarinen, who was outstanding in the tournament. And that's where I want to go with this, guys. I'm looking at the performances of Predators players at this tournament. The aforementioned Annunen, who Chris MacFarland knows well, considering he drafted or was part of drafting Jussi Saarinen with the Colorado Avalanche. Annunen went 7-1-0 with a 147 goals against average and a 933 save percentage in the tournament. Again, he backstopped the Finns to gold. Roman Josi had 12 points in 10 games, played 30 minutes in the championship game, and won MVP of the tournament. Ryan O'Reilly had 9 points in 10 games for Canada. Even Ryan Ufko was over there as well for Team USA. So here's what I'm wondering, Willie. Should the performances of the Predators players at the World Championship have any influence on the team's direction? We were talking about earlier in the show that Forsberg, O'Reilly, Stamkos, Josi, Saros, they're all in their 30s. But Annunen went over there. He was excellent down the stretch for the Predators. He backstopped the Finns to gold, was outstanding. Roman Josi won MVP of the tournament. Ryan O'Reilly, nearly a point-per-game player in the tournament. And really good players go over to this tournament. It's basically a lot of NHL players who don't make the playoffs or their teams get eliminated early. I am wondering if their performances in this tournament should have any bearing on what Chris MacFarland decides to do.
I think there's two levels. The first layer would be guys like Riker Lee and Ryan Ufko, young players. That's a great experience for them. I think the Sharks might tell you that Macklin Celebrini, and then I'll give you another example, the one that you're talking about, you've talked about a lot, Adam, and that's Porter Martone. Throwing a young guy on a roster like that is a great way to maybe accelerate development of a very young player. So I think that's significant. And I think a guy like Annunen, there is some significance to advancing for your country where it does mean a lot, right? So it's not like there's no pressure. Like I think for a USA player, there's probably no pressure. Did you win the gold? No. Did you win the Nah. Okay. Yeah, it was a fun experience, but there's no pressure of you got to win like it would be for the basketball team right? If you're USA Basketball, if you don't win, people are going to notice. What the heck? Why didn't we win? Right? That for Canada, it might be. For Finland, there's a lot of national pride. So on and doing that for them, I do think is significant. There's some significance, but not a huge amount. Is how I would answer that. It's a sliver, but in the big picture, does a GM worry about it if a guy has a bad World Championships? No.
615-737-1025. We will continue to take your reaction to the news of Chris MacFarland being hired by the Predators as president of hockey operations and GM. He will hold a news conference tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Central at Bridgestone Arena. I assume we will cover it for you live or stream it for you live. But coming up next, Corey Masisak, Colorado Avalanche reporter for the Denver Post, will join us. He's an old friend of mine. He's on the ground in Denver. He covers the Avalanche on a daily basis. Let's get his perspective on Chris MacFarland and what the Predators can expect now that MacFarland will be running the show here in Nashville. 615-737-1025. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game. DMase, Vingan and Donick, 102.5 The Game. Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Let's go to our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in an old friend of mine, Corey Masisak, Colorado Avalanche reporter for the Denver Post, as he helps us react to the news today that the Predators have hired ex-Avalanche GM Chris MacFarland as their GM, as well as the president of hockey operations. Corey, how are you?
I'm a little under the weather, but otherwise I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
We're good. We appreciate you doing this despite being under the weather. So let's start with how this news landed in Denver. What was the reaction to Chris MacFarland leaving the Avalanche after 11 years and joining the Predators?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty shocking. There's been some chatter out there about it maybe being a possibility, but I mean, I think definitely that it happened kind of as quickly as it did. I think it, kind of maybe come together in the last few days is definitely surprising. I mean, honestly, to be totally honest, like the main focus here since they lost to Vegas has been on Jared Bednar, like whether or not they were going to bring him back as head coach. And it was also like, oh yeah, by the way, Chris MacFarland might be talking to the Nashville Predators too. And then all of a sudden that has now happened. And, it does look like they are going to keep Bednar for at least for another year for sure. But like, yeah, it's pretty stunning. I mean, it's, look, he is getting a promotion. It's just interesting to contrast this all happening right now. Like when the most recent thing like this to have happened was Vegas blocking Bruce Cassidy from being able to talk to rivals. And I think there are some Avs fans who definitely wanted the Avs to be like, no, just don't let them talk to them. But like, this is different. This is in like the history of the NHL, almost always a guy in that position is allowed to talk to another team if he's going to get a raise and a promotion.
So, Corey, one question a lot of our listeners have about Chris MacFarland and what he was able to do in Colorado. Can you explain the dynamic between MacFarland and Avalanche president of hockey operations, Joe Sakic? People around here want to know, all right, how much responsibility did Chris MacFarland have for how successful the Colorado Avalanche have been? Who called the shots, etc.? So as someone who's there every day, can you explain the dynamic between Sakic and MacFarland?
Yeah, Joe Sakic gets all the credit and Chris MacFarland gets all of the crap. That's basically that's how, Joe Sakic is a legend here. Obviously one of the best players of all time, an absolute, literally legend in this community. And he was the GM in the run up to them winning the Stanley Cup in 2022. And MacFarland was named the GM right after that, in part because a bunch of other teams, at least more than one, I think, wanted to hire him as their GM. And so they kind of, they bumped Sakic up to president and they made him the GM. And look, like Joe Sakic is still involved. I don't think he is nearly as involved on a day-to-day basis as some Avs fans want to believe he's going to be now, because he's the interim GM for at least another month or so, or until they, go through their process. But yeah, no, look, I think Chris MacFarland was, Joe Sakic's right-hand man for several years, building that 2022 championship team. And again, here fans see no titles since then. Like this team is the dynasty that wasn't right now, and maybe always will be. But to me, the general manager has built two or three really, really, really good teams. I mean, they had the best roster in the league this year. They ran the league for 7 months and had a bad week. And I don't know how much of that you can really put on the general manager. Like he's nominated for GM of the year, and I think he probably deserves to win. So I would say he has, a lot of, I think he's, I think if Joe Sakic's name was Joe Smith, everybody would just assume he's the GM or that Chris is the GM and he runs everything day to day, and that's just the way it is. But because it's Joe Sakic, it's a little bit different here. But I don't think that Chris MacFarland is like, basically the assistant GM here. I think he's been the GM. He's had the final say over, all the minor moves, most of the major moves, etc. in his time.
Corey Masisak of the Denver Post is with us on DMase, Vingan and Donick. Corey, before I hand it off to my partner, Willy Donick, we've seen the bold and savvy moves that Chris MacFarland has made in recent years to try to get the Avalanche another crack at the Stanley Cup, whether it's trading Mikko Rantanen and then bringing in Martin Necas, trading for Brock Nelson, trading for Nazem Kadri, what he did to completely overhaul the goaltending, bringing in Scott Wedgwood and Mackenzie Blackwood. There's been a lot to like about what MacFarland has done. What are some of the criticisms you would have of how MacFarland did his job as Avalanche GM? Because as you said, the Avalanche have been the best regular season team over the past 4 years. But as someone who's there every day, are there any weaknesses in MacFarland's game, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, look, they basically from the start of all this was, trading Justus Anunen for Scott Wedgwood. And since that day, they have basically overhauled, the entire team around the core. It's, whatever it is, 13, 14 new guys in the last couple of years. I would say like they did, they did everything that they almost everything that they could to build a juggernaut this year. The one thing that's like kind of left hanging now is they traded for Nick Blankenberg as like kind of like the extra defenseman because they had 6 and they didn't really trust anybody beyond that 6. Nick Blankenberg was kind of a mixed bag for them. And I think Chris MacFarland even said on the record that he was trying to trade for one more defenseman and didn't get that done. Now, look, if you're, for 30 organizations, he didn't get a good enough number 7 defenseman is the biggest criticism you have about the roster, you're living pretty good. But if you want to be the team that wins the Stanley Cup, it did. Look, they had, whether it was Josh Manson or Sam Walensky or Cale Makar, they had defense injuries kind of almost throughout the playoffs, and it did eventually probably hurt them. I would say, criticism, I don't know. I mean, to me, I guess it depends on where he's going and where Nashville is going, right? Like, I think he has shown that, like, look, give him a solid base to build from and tell him to be aggressive, and he's going to go do it. And I think he's performed very admirably in that role. We've never seen him like do a rebuild or anything approaching to it, or even, trying to take a team that wasn't in the playoffs and make them a cup contender. So that's a little bit of an unknown, but I mean, I think generally speaking, he has, I don't know. I mean, obviously the Mikko Rantanen thing was very bold, and at times it has looked like a great move for them. And there have been a couple of times, specifically Game 7 last year, where it didn't. But I think a lot of just if you went through line by line, like here's the 20 trades that Chris MacFarland made as GM of the Avs, they won more than their fair share for sure.
He has been covering the Colorado Avalanche and Chris MacFarland, and we're getting some insights on what makes him tick. So, Corey, let's do you think he's come under fire some, or has there been much criticism that they traded so many of the future assets? If you take a look, they clearly have traded a lot of first round picks and other draft picks. Well, a lot of them to Nashville, ironically. Yeah. But do you think that is okay? Is that what the fans wanted because they're in a window, or do you think they might have gone too far in that area?
I think that if there was a second Stanley Cup trophy, or I guess a fourth in franchise history, going into that trophy case at any point in the last 3 years, he would, everything would be great. It would be, I don't think very few Avalanche fans have said, oh no, we are trading that 2028 second round pick. What are we going to do? It's been cup or bust, and they've been as aggressive as anybody. I think they have actually, done a pretty good job also. Like, I look at like the trade, like they went all in last year and it didn't work out. Well, then they were going to be, how are they going to make the team from last year better for this year? Well, I think kind of like one of the more underrated trades he's made was sending Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood to Columbus for Gavin Brindley and a pick. Like they've kind of started to do the thing that Vegas has done over the years, where they buy in February and March, and then do a little bit of like offloading and selling in the summer to kind of get back under the cap and to make things more flexible. And I think by doing that trade, like, first off, Gavin Brindley is a pretty good young player. And second off, that allowed them the cap flexibility to sign Brent Burns, to trade for Nazem Kadri, to trade for Nick Waugh. Like, all that stuff kind of happened because they offloaded whatever that would have been, like $9 million in salary cap space. So yeah, I don't think he's gotten a lot of criticism for that here now, but it was coming if they don't win. I think if they don't win next year, 2028 and beyond, this team was going to need a refresh. And maybe he saw that coming and said, well, this is an opportunity to give myself a reset and start over. And that's part of the reason why he's there.
That's leading me into the next question, Corey, because I think a lot of people in Nashville are saying, why would you leave Colorado when you've got this loaded team and you're in a window to win, to go to Nashville that's got a lot of tough decisions ahead? They're in the middle. Do you want to take a step back, or do you want to try to go all in and be bold? So what do you think the answer is? You've thrown in a lot of things, like he gets none of the credit but all of the blame because Sakic is such a legend. I look at that. And also what you said is, in the coming years, there will be some difficult things that Colorado will have to tackle, so to speak, and he would be an easy scapegoat along those lines. So where does the answer lie in your mind?
Yeah, I think, I've thought about that a lot the last couple of days. Like, it would surprise me if he took this job and ownership told him, hey, you have to keep all of these veteran players and you have to build a contender out of what we have right now. Like, to me, it would be weirder to me that he left his current situation for Nashville if it wasn't like they're going to give him control. Obviously they're going to give him, everything. But they would also tell him to keep all the players, or I would imagine that a rebuild is coming of some sort. And I think he probably looked at that and saw, well, hey, it wouldn't be like starting from zero, because they already do have a few interesting prospects and they do have a lot of interesting pieces that you could trade. So yeah, no, I think that's, to me, it would make a lot more sense for him. I mean, maybe he's just doing it because he wanted to do it, but if this was, this was a chance for him to really kind of get out on his own, put his stamp on a franchise and really build something kind of from the ground up. Whereas, because even if he stayed here for another, 2, 3, 5 years and they did win one more championship, I don't know if he was going to be remembered 20 or 30 years from now as hey, they got the architect of their fourth title or whatever, that sort of thing.
What is his relationship or strategy with the media? Does he do a lot of media?
No, I shouldn't say. He's actually pretty good at it, but he does not do a lot of me. I would imagine he will be less in the media spotlight than say Barry Trotz was. I mean, Barry was always one of the more media friendly people as a coach and all that. But yeah, he probably will at least here in Colorado, he would talk, maybe 3-4 times a year.
Interesting. My last question is, Corey, how did you view the interaction between he and Joe Sakic? Because I think maybe part of his motivation to come to Nashville is he will be the guy who the buck stops with him. He is leading everybody else, where from afar, certainly with Joe Sakic's stature in Denver, right? And we use John Elway too for football fans. That great player who leads a franchise and then moves into the front office. You got a lot of cachet there. How would you define what Chris MacFarland did day to day and how much responsibility Joe Sakic had in these last few years?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think the arrangement kind of worked well for both of them. I think Joe was kind of done with the grind. He wanted to take a step back. He wanted to live his life. I mean, obviously he's made more than enough money. He doesn't need that. But yeah, I just think that Chris was an up and coming guy who got his first shot at being a GM, but he also had it kind of worked both ways. He had Joe there to a perfect example of this. Whenever they lost to game 7 in Dallas last year, before this Vegas thing, I thought oh my God, this is one of the craziest, most shocking losses in NHL history, because of how it turned out. Joe came to the end of season media availability. It was Joe and Chris. Joe wasn't at the one the year before, which was my first year, but he was there last year. And I thought, and it did seem like it was to take some of the heat off of Chris, because Chris had just traded Mikko Rantanen, and Mikko Rantanen had just, ended their season basically. So I do think that Chris ran the team. I don't think I think he ran every day-to-day thing like he was deciding on, minor league call-ups and all in draft picks and trades. And I think Joe, I don't want to undersell that Joe. I don't want to say like Joe had no say in the team, but I think he was more like, hey, we need you to, we're struggling with this Mikko Rantanen negotiation, and we might have to trade him. Now Joe's going to get a little more involved, like that. Those like level things more so than like, hey, we're going to trade Justus Noonan for Scott Wedgwood. Does Joe have to sign off on that? I think Chris probably just did that one on his own.
Corey Masisak of the Denver Post has been our guest on DMase, Vin Gnandanek, giving us perspective on Chris MacFarland, the Predators' new president of hockey operations and GM. Corey, we appreciate you doing this, especially being under the weather. Feel better. We'll catch up soon.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
615-737-1025. I'll tell you one thing I didn't like. I don't like this idea of Chris MacFarland not talking to us every week, like Barry Trotz did.
I was just thinking that too. I'm like, ooh.
I mean, Chris MacFarland, he's got an open invitation to join our program every week, just like Barry Trotz did, but I'm not sure that's going to happen. We'll see. 615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your reaction to the hiring of MacFarland, and we'll wrap up the show. Coming up next, Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025 The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting some type of goal to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But I got some good news because at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understand the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge. It addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
DMase, Vingan, and Donick 1025. The Game, Willy Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Some breaking news in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons are signing wide receiver Drake London to a 4-year, $141 million extension worth up to $150 million, including $100 million guaranteed. On a per-year basis, Drake London is now the third highest paid receiver in the NFL, behind Jackson Smith and Jigba and Jamar Chase. He's now ahead of Justin Jefferson in fourth and CeeDee Lamb in fifth. Derek Mason, as you said to me during the break, it's not if you deserve it, it's when you're up for a contract.
Yeah.
But Drake London, third highest paid receiver per year in the NFL. What do you make of that?
That was a great deal for him. It keeps him in Atlanta, for some years, and hopefully he can grow with either Tua or Penix or whoever they choose to have at quarterback moving forward after this season. Because obviously I think it's going to be Tua, but what's going to happen after that? But again, listen, it's not how much you sign or who signs it, it's when you sign it. Because at one point, Justin Jefferson was the highest paid receiver. And then at another point, it was another guy, and then another guy. So right now, Drake London, regardless of what you may think of him, I think he's a hell of a player. But, if you're asking me truthfully, like, do I consider him the third best wide receiver in the league? No, I don't. Is he a top 10 guy? Yes. But again, it's not, what you may think you're worth is what the market is going to tell you you're worth. And right now the market has him as the third highest paid wide receiver. And again, he deserves it, because he's been a bright spot for that team. But if I had to rank wide receivers, he wouldn't be in my top 3.
Cameron on our text line says, Drake London? Yes. Drake London. Drake London, now the third highest paid wide receiver per year in the NFL after signing a massive extension with the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go to our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com, and welcome in Wyatt. Wyatt, thank you for calling and waiting. Please go ahead. Wyatt, are you there?
Wyatt.
Go ahead.
Call us back, Wyatt. I'm not sure what that was about.
Was that some cold feet there last minute? What's going on there?
We heard Mrs. Wyatt.
Yes, he just froze.
Like encouraging Wyatt. Go ahead, talk.
He froze. Wyatt could have been a little kid.
Could have been.
Yeah, could have been a little kid.
Not when I talked to him.
Oh,
bringing him on.
Kid, okay.
It's like that. What was it? The Texas Tech quarterback. That one meme of him where he's about to snap the ball and you just see his hands vibrating all over the screen.
Well, someone is calling in. It might be Wyatt calling us back.
Come on, Wyatt.
And we'll get you on the line, Wyatt.
Pull it together.
Come on, Wyatt. Let's see.
Take a deep breath.
Hold on. We're waiting to see if this is Wyatt on the line. Connor's on the phone. It's Wyatt. All right, Let's try again. Wyatt, thank you for calling. Now, please go ahead.
It's Ryan, not Wyatt.
Okay, I'm sorry. I saw Wyatt on the call screener. My bad.
You're all good. So, with the new GM, Adam, I want to know your opinion. How comfortable do you think the safety net of the players, the scouting staff, the coaching staff is right now? And I think it's a little on fire because MacFarland's got only ties to one player on this team, and that's Eustace. And everyone else, and maybe O'Reilly, everyone else he has no ties to. You think that they might be a little on fire, a little bit scared right now, knowing that they have a bad season, that this is it?
It's a good question. Thank you, Ryan, not Wyatt. Our bad. Ryan in Mount Juliet, of course, a frequent caller to the program. Look, when change happens this significantly in an organization, everybody sort of wants to know where they fall in line. And although Chris MacFarland doesn't have ties to many of the players on the roster, as Ryan mentioned, the only one who comes to mind immediately is Eustace Onanen, who MacFarland traded here for Scott Wedgwood. But outside of that, I'm not sure if he has any previous affiliations with any of the players. I mean, those conversations are going to be had. And we'll see what MacFarland decides to do with the roster. If MacFarland, as you said, Derek, if MacFarland decides that I've analyzed the roster and I don't see this team truly competing for the next few years, so my intention is to rebuild. I'm sure Steven Stamkos or Ryan O'Reilly, maybe even Roman Josi, come to his office and say, hey, let's talk this out, because those players only have so many years left in the NHL. So would I say that they're worried or scared? I can't speak to that, but I'm sure, Derek, in your experience, when a new coach comes in, a new GM comes in, everybody's on notice a little bit.
Yeah, everybody is. And not so much so because, a guy may think he's getting traded. Now, listen, I think there are two ends of the spectrum. Those older guys that still may be playing good ball, whether it be hockey, baseball, it doesn't matter. Good. They're good at their sport still. And then it has those bottom guys that hadn't quite made their name or still in that sort of developmental stage. Those guys are typically the guys that tend to worry the most for different reasons. The older guy thinking maybe they're getting ready to move away from me. Not that I can't play, but maybe they're looking to go younger. Than the younger guy that hadn't gotten a chance is thinking like, man, if they hadn't seen anything on film already, I may be one of the guys that they choose to trade, let go, or whatever the case may be. But everybody in the building, when a new head coach come in or a new GM, everybody is sort of that unknown. Now, you have some guys on the team that know, hey, listen, 99.9% chance I'm going to be here, but yet and still, there's still that sense of, okay, how are we going to mesh, with this individual? For me, it was a head coach. For these guys, it's how are we going to mesh with the GM, and then how is the head coach going to mesh with the GM, and then will that affect us?
I agree with Derek. I'll take it this direction. I think from MacFarland's standpoint, I think every GM has to be emotionally detached from every player, whether you've been there. Like, let's take David Poile. He was there forever for the Predators. He still traded Shea Weber, who was an absolute beloved player who someday still might have a statue out. I don't know. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was drafted by the Predators when he was 18. You know what I mean? But he still was able to detach emotionally. I think that's a talent. I think I would be, and you guys know me, right? I would be much tougher. It would be harder for me to be able to make that detachment, to make the right decisions. Is it easier when you first come in? Maybe. But I think that just goes with the job description in my mind. You have to be able to step back from how much you love a player personally or respect a player personally. You have to make the right move no matter how much you admire a player.
The Stanley Cup final gets underway tonight. Game 1 in Raleigh. Golden Knights at Hurricanes. It's scheduled to start at 7 p.m. Central, but we know it's going to be closer to like 7:15 Central. Willie, since you were not on the show yesterday, give us your outlook for this series. Who wins and why?
It's just really hard to go against Vegas. I think these are two really great franchises to study from what we've been talking about, what to do with the Predators. How do you build a winning team? Because these two teams could not be more different, I think. They're very, very different in how they've been built. The steadfast belief in Rod Brind'Amour, even though they, quote, haven't won the big one, is giving them benefits now. I asked the question last week, would Toronto or New York or one of the bigger markets have been as patient as Carolina has been with Brind'Amour, even though they've done great things? They've stuck with their formula, and they're really good at identifying what works. And they might have their moment in the sun here. And Vegas, of course, if it doesn't work, we're going to go big in a different direction, or we're going to go get another big player. Who cares about next year or the year after? We're going to take it case by case, and we're going for it. That having been said, how the teams match up, I think the key is, can Carolina get enough quality against the size of Vegas's defense and the quality of Vegas's defensive system. What Vegas has had that all year long. They just haven't had the goalie to make the key saves at the key times. Carter Hart's done that and more. So can Carolina score against them? There's probably going to be some games where Carolina outshoots Vegas in this series by a pretty wide margin. That is not uncommon of Carolina. But I think Vegas is one of those savvy teams that could get outshot 33-19, but still win the game because they'll wait for their moment and they'll be able to score and they'll withstand the barrage over and over of Carolina. You agree, Adam?
I'm leaning Carolina. I'm leaning Carolina in the series. I have been so impressed by how clinical the Hurricanes have been in dissecting their opponents throughout this postseason. One blip, game one, after not playing for a week and a half. But when I look at games 2 through 5 of the Eastern Conference Final, I'm not sure I've seen that much of a beatdown analytically the way I saw the Hurricanes just dominate the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, there were some games that went to overtime in the series, but if you look under the surface, the Hurricanes demolished the Canadiens. Now, the Vegas Golden Knights are a much stiffer test, but I've got a soft spot for the Hurricanes as well. I'm going to go with the Hurricanes. That's my choice.
I'm rooting for the Hurricanes, but I'm picking Vegas for what you said right at the end there, Adam. I just think Vegas is so different than the three teams that Carolina just buzzsawed, and I don't think the matchup will be as good for the Hurricanes. Like, for example, the Predators this year, they're just not a good matchup. They could not hang with Carolina, and Carolina does that to a lot of teams. I just don't think – I just think that Vegas has what it takes to play Carolina, and I think they might, with their big game guys and their luck, they seem to always have things fall right for them. I will take Vegas by a nose.
Quickly, Willie, we did talk about this yesterday as well. NBA Finals, Spurs versus Knicks. Biggest play of Game 7. Luke Cornett with his LeBron James moment.
Oh, man, what a moment for him. And, you know, I knew when I visited Vanderbilt way back when, his dad, Frank, he ended up playing in the NBA. He was a great player at Vanderbilt. Not quite as tall as Luke. And Luke is just a great story. He grew, 7 inches? His senior year in high school, he was not being recruited very much. Kevin Stallings, maybe a little bit with the Vanderbilt connection, saw a late bloomer, and here's this guy making a career in the NBA, and now he has a great moment like that. That's just a great story. So congratulations to Luke Cornett. What a performance by the Spurs in Game 7 on the road. Was that something? Like that looks like a special group that's just starting. And like if you watch that series, you could say to yourself, I remember when the Spurs started to figure it out. And now, what a great test on the stage in New York City to see if they're already ready to win the whole thing.
Game 1 of the NBA Finals is tomorrow night, New York at San Antonio, a 7:30 p.m. Central tip-off. Tonight, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, Vegas at Carolina, a 7 p.m. start in that game. We will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock. We will react to Chris MacFarland's introductory news conference as president of hockey operations and GM of the Nashville Predators. Who knows? Maybe Chris MacFarland might even join the program tomorrow. We'll find out tomorrow. I will be at the news conference. I'm looking forward to hearing what MacFarland, Bill Haslam, and Sean Henry have to say. Willie Donick, good luck to the Big Red tomorrow in the first game of the championship series. We hope you are in a festive mood when the show starts tomorrow at 3.
He's gone. He hung up.
Oh, he hung up. He's already ready for the game.
Oh, yeah, he's getting ready.
All right.
Good luck to Mahoney tomorrow.
I see where we fit on that.
Oh, I'm more hurt than you are.
I see where we fit with Willie Donick. Anyway, Willie will be back tomorrow at 3 with the rest of us. In the meantime, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Be loved, love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, and wonderful day. I love you. The team loves you. You hear that music. Don't forget about us because we will not forget about you. You will hear our voices on these airways starting tomorrow at 3 p.m. and we will cover the press conference of the new GM/president of hockey, MacFarland. I like that name. Don't you? But either way, As I always say, we're going to be talking and
You gonna be listening.
peace.